is moving all over this place. He's moving people all over this place. And today we get to hear the story of one of yours. Chris Lahr grew up right here in this church to some awesome parents, Jay and Beth, and they did a pretty great job, I think. When I first moved to Huntington, Chris is shaking his head. I don't know. When I first moved to Huntington, I heard this story about this guy doing some crazy stuff in Philly and how he was from Huntington. I'm like, really? Like, this guy's from Huntington and he lives in Philly now? And so I got to meet him. We got to have lunch at Los Amigos and hear his story. And I knew from the moment that Chris and I sat there sharing chips and salsa that this is a brother who has a heart for God's people, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of language, regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of what side of the tracks they're from, regardless of what city they're from, regardless of anything. Chris's heart is for God's people and for God's people being restored and seeing heaven come closer to their life. And he'll use any method necessary to communicate that and to show that. And so Chris and his beautiful family live in Philly and live in a neighborhood that needs Jesus and needs to be loved by Jesus. And God has called Chris to that. And I absolutely respect and am honored to call him brother who has responded to that call so bravely, so adamantly, and with such passion and zeal. And so, church, I'd like to introduce to you and make your own feel welcome today, Chris Lahr.
Good morning, everybody. Wow, this is a different perspective. I'm used to being down there with mom and dad. This is nice. We're going to start out in Matthew 28, if you have your Bibles. I know, do you guys bring their Bibles nowadays, or they just throw it up on the screen? Oh, this is still a Bible church. I love it. All right, Matthew 28. Let's get to it. I'm going to start us off with this real quick. All right, Matthew 28:19. I have been given authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. And I know some people fade fast. So if you fade fast, just remember this one note. God is with you always. Right? He's always with us to the end of the age. And I'm going to talk a little bit about discipleship today. And what's interesting is my roots. I did a little math the other day. And in 6 days, I've been following Jesus for 24 years. Following Jesus seriously, right? For 24 years. I started following when I was 2. Just kidding. And a lot of my roots of following Jesus happened on this altar and here and amongst some of you guys that pray for me. And I'm grateful for that, and I'm humbled for that. But when I talk about discipleship, I want us to make a distinction, right? A distinction that goes beyond just believing in Jesus. What I'm talking about is we're following Jesus, and there's a distinction there because you can be a follower without being a disciple, right? I mean, you could be a believer, without being a disciple, right? And I think that a lot of times the temptation is that we believe and we think we're good. Like if we go to church and we believe everything's cool, right? But in reality, it's not the same as being a disciple. And I want to challenge us today to go beyond this notion of believing, because the scriptures last time I read said, so you believe in Jesus, big whoop. Even the demons believe in that. Well, sort of, that's my version of it. But, and so I want us to begin thinking, and it started for me really growing up. There's never a time, I don't think, that I didn't believe in Jesus. And I remember, different times along the way, we started going to church camp, right? We still had the church camp. You guys are so soft nowadays. You guys have a thing called air conditioning and like running water that doesn't taste like eggs. You know what I'm talking about, right? And so like I'm at this church camp, right? And my kids, I tell them, it's back in the day before plumbing, had outhouses and stuff. And, it was back in hardened days. But I remember back in those days, my chin hair was a little shorter. My hair on top of my head was a little longer. And talking to my church counselor, right? And growing up in the church, you hear the stories. You already have the belief set, right? But there was something about this guy that took it it made me begin thinking, you know what? I need to go beyond just simple beliefs, and I need to start following Jesus. And I was at a good point in my life. It was right before my senior year of high school. It was at a high point in my life, literally. I liked what I was doing. I liked some of the things that was going on. And but something about it, I was just like, you know what? And I remember it was a Thursday night, right? And you know how it is when they have the altar calls, man, and it had the Olivetians, right? They still around? Right on, they still rocking. They still singing Kumbaya at the altar calls, right? Well, they were on like the 40th verse of Kumbaya, right? And everybody came down. And the thing was cool, is my mom, she told me later that she gathered together. She got almost all the elderly ladies in the church and said, pray for him. He needs help, right? And this might be his last call. Marlene is probably part of that prayer group, right? And she was praying for him. You weren't old back then, though. But, and the thing was, right? And I found out later that there was like a couple kids that told me that they woke up in the middle of the night because God was impressing on their hearts to pray for me. And I was like, dang, I didn't think I was that bad. You know what I mean? And so we get up there, and I remember they're doing the altar call, and literally usually Thursday night's the snot night where everybody comes up and snots over themselves, cries over themselves, and they're up there for a real long time. And but everybody come up and already sat down before they even done singing. And I was like, this is a record. And so I just prayed. I said, God, look, if you're really real, I'll give up everything I have. I'll give my partying, my friends. I'll give up everything I have. I'll give up Scott. I'll give up Chris. I'll give up everything I'll have, and I'll follow you the rest of my life. I said, but if you're real, have someone ask me to go up and pray, right? And no sooner I did that, I don't know if you guys remember Jeff Cook, right? He's the only guy I could burp as loud as I could. He was sitting 2 seats away from me, and he said, hey, you want to go pray? And from that moment on, I knew the reality of Jesus beyond just some head knowledge, but that somehow he was just some guy that I could really follow. And I remember going up there, and it wasn't a real emotional thing for me. You know, I kind of came up and said, God, I'm giving you everything. And that night, you know, it was the first time I had talked to my counselor. I was like, how do you hear God, man? I never heard God. Like, I don't audibly hear him. And he said sometimes through impressions, sometimes you hear it through people talking. And my first impression, right, is I don't know if you guys remember these things, but we had these things called cassette tapes. They're about this big, right? Nowadays they have these iPods, pads, and everything else. But we had a cassette tape, and I love my music, right? And I had some good music, real good music, right, Chris? Gotta get amen. All right, there you go. See my brother over here? All right, but anyway, so I said, you know what? I need to get rid of my music. And nobody preached it, right? Nobody did. But I just felt like, you know what? This was something that was wrapped up. My identity was kind of wrapped up in that. And I feel like, you know, I want to get rid of this, not because somebody's telling me to, but because I want to show people that I'm for real. And so we went in my room, dumped them all out, and they started breaking them. And I started crying like a baby, right? And then we burned them, and everybody's supposed to have their nightly devotions, right? Where they're giving their devotions, all that, and everybody's welcome. What's the fire? What's up with that? And we're ripping up all these tapes. Well, the next morning I get up and they say, Chris, you got to check this out. I'm like, what? And it was funny, y'all. Kids everywhere ripping up their cassette tapes, right? Say, we're going to give it all to Jesus. And there's this one girl, poor soul. She was sitting there, I can't do it. I can't do it. I said, what is it? Whitney Houston, let me do it for you. You know, helping people into the kingdom, you know. And but I learned something about discipleship is that it costs something. It costs something. Luke 14, 26, 28. Luke 14, 26 to 28. Says, if you want to be my disciple, you must hate everyone else by comparison. Your father, your mother, your wife, your children, brothers and sisters, yes, even your own life. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciple. And if you do not carry your own cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. But don't begin until you count the cost. So here's what I challenge to y'all. Like, if you find yourself, you're simply a believer today and you're not really a disciple, you're not really following Jesus, I would say fall asleep quick. Because it's like you see in the Matrix, right? Because Nazarenes are allowed to see movies nowadays. It's great. So, you know, you see in the Matrix, right? You take the red pill, it all changes. Right? If you take the blue pill, you're cool. You just kind of go in the mode you've always gone in. And some of us is taking that blue pill, and we're cool with the way the things are, right? But if you take the red pill, if you take Jesus, and you take him at his word and say, I'm going to be a follower of Jesus and a disciple of Jesus, then it all flips. Guess what? Jesus will mess up your life. He messed up mine, right? He'll mess up your life. And no matter what you find yourself doing, it's because of him and him alone. And this is what following Jesus is. There's a cost to following Jesus. And I want us to look at Luke 11 real quick. When it comes to counting this cost, and it talks about we want to make disciples, right? Well, if we want to make disciples, and that's one thing that I've really appreciated about the Nazarene church is a focus on missions, a focus on reaching out. But I say the first step in real discipleship is you got to ask yourself, are you a disciple? Have you yourself become a disciple? Are you yourself? We got to start with ourselves. And I love this passage. My wife hates it, but it's when Jesus was invited to the Pharisees' house, right? So the Pharisees, it was the religious guys of the day. They were the guys in the holiness movement of the day, right? And so he goes to the house, but instead of washing his hands like he's supposed to, right, he skips the whole hand washing thing. He just goes right to grubbing, right? And I do the same thing. My wife yells at me. I'm saying, I'm just trying to be like Jesus. You know what I mean? But anyway, so here he goes. It says, his host was amazed to see that he sat down without first performing the hand washing ceremony required by Jewish custom. Then the Lord said to him, you Pharisees are so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are filthy, full of greed and wickedness. Fools, didn't God make the inside as well as the outside? So clean the inside by giving gifts to the poor, and you will be clean all over. This is probably the biggest, the hardest thing for us. As church people, the hardest thing about being a disciple is that we have our outsides cleaned, right? We look good. I remember growing up, as long as you didn't drink or smoke and get caught cussing, you were good, right? And as long as you kind of have the image of Christianity, you were good, right? And it was fine, and you could get by with things. But I'm telling you, that this is more to following Jesus than just having the outside. We must also have our insides. Now, one of the things about the Nazarene church, right? We rooted ourselves, and we were a holiness movement, right? I went to seminary, and I actually took a Nazarene class and learned some of the history of what I came from, and I didn't even know. And I remember, being a Nazarene today is different than when I was a young kid, right? I mean, it's different, right? And people dress different, look different. There's different rules, right? Like before you couldn't watch movies, right? Which nobody followed, right? You know what I'm saying, right? There's some things that were hidden. But my favorite was no dancing. I think we should bring that back because I'm a terrible dancer, and it gives me an excuse at weddings to not dance. Anyway, I think it's a good one. Look in the manual. The third one, you guys couldn't wear shorts, right? You remember that, right? And everybody did except when you went to church camp. And you didn't have the air conditioning like you did back in them days, right? And so I remember, it was 140 degrees out, and girls could wear their skirts and all that stuff, but guys, we're sweating, right? And this is hard times. And they said, sorry, you can't wear shorts at the church camp because in the manual it says you can't. And I'm like, dang, so we looked at the manual, and we didn't see a thing that said guys couldn't wear dresses. So guess what, baby? We got to the girls, we got some dresses, and went to dinner. And we come in there with our dresses on, and they try to tell us to change, but hey, the manual. We're good Nazarenes, yo. And they let us wear shorts the rest of the time. And guess what? I guess they talked about it in the district, and from then on, we could wear shorts. So you can thank us, you young guys. Right here, baby. We did it for you. All right? But it's interesting, right? Because it's part of the thing about being clean on the outside is we can create these other laws and these things to try to make sure we're safe. Now, I think we got to be careful because as new generations come up, you can throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, we don't need this holiness anymore. And that's not true. That's one of the strengths of the Nazarene church is to look at holiness. How can we be holy? How can we be what God wants us to be? But holiness goes deeper than just this outside ring where we look good on the outside. We got to be good. And it's interesting in this passage. He says, you want to be clean? Give what you have inside of your cup to the poor. Another thing I learned about Nazarene history. We were rooted in the holiness tradition, right? And they thought, you know what, we need to split from the holiness tradition, like the mainstream, because they weren't doing enough for the poor. We aren't doing enough for the poor. So what they did is one of the things that defined them was their church buildings had to be simple. They had to wear clothes that were very simple so that the common person could be a part of that. And the very core of the Nazarene faith was to be a people of the poor, like a church for the poor. And I think about that. And it's real easy, right? You come to my house, it's real easy to see poverty, right? You see the violence, you see the drugs, you see, people on the streets, you see the trash, you see a lot of this stuff. And it's easy to say that's poverty. It's easy to go to Haiti, right, and say that's poverty. But I learned from Mother Teresa, she said that the poor are like Jesus in his distressing disguise, right? And they're everywhere. It's like following Jesus is like playing hide and go seek. And if you have eyes to see, the poor are even in this church, right? And one thing I can tell you, yeah, sure, Philly's jacked, right? But I'm going to tell you what, Huntington's jacked up too. Y'all some jacked up people just as we are jacked up people. You know, I know just as many people going to jail for drugs here. People addicted to drugs here, right? There's people that there's poverty here. There's needs that are here. There's people addicted to porn here. There's marriages that are breaking up here. It's all of it is just as messed up here. And I'm telling you, you don't have to go on mission trips, right? To see the poor, right? If we begin being Jesus right here, Jesus is not necessarily calling you somewhere else, but begin being a disciple here and see what God does. So we have to begin with ourselves. We have to begin with ourselves. And one of the passages that I really like is in John 1. And, it's a passage that says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, Word was God, Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And in 14 it says, so the Word became human and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness. And we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. So you can't have discipleship. One of the things like that intrigues me the most about Jesus, right? A lot of people are like, wow, the death of Jesus is very powerful. But I think something that intrigues me just as much, if not even more than the death of Jesus, is his birth, right? The mere fact that God became human, put on skin, and lived among us blows my mind. Right? And discipleship cannot happen without the incarnation. That's what that big word is. Incarnation is Jesus, God becoming flesh. Discipleship. You want to make disciples, it cannot happen without incarnation. And what I mean by that is I think we need to have a shift in our mentality in the church. We need to shift from this notion of, hey, we need to be missionaries to we need to be neighbors. And there's a shift there, right? Nowhere in scriptures do I see where it says be a missionary. Nowhere do I even see the word missionary except in the titles that says Paul's second missionary journey. But a lot of places I say, if you want to be for real with God, love your neighbor as yourself, right? Pour yourself out as a neighbor. Now, a neighbor is someone who lives among people. So you could be a neighbor here, or you could go to Haiti and be a neighbor. You can go wherever at in the world. See, missionary, I think, has this connotation as I have something that you don't. I have something I can give you, a handout, something like that. Whereas a neighbor realized, I'm a beloved son of God, just like you are. And I have something to learn from you, just as you have something to learn from me. We can be together, right? And there's this, in context of neighboring that Jesus comes to us. Now, 14 years ago, about my wife and I, we moved to Philadelphia. And we moved to one of the poorer neighborhoods in Philly. The only thing I really regret about moving to Philly was doing it with my mother and father-in-law, right? They came with us on move day. They really haven't been back since. Like we're driving down the block, right? And we couldn't get down the block because there was a big drug bust a few houses down from where we were living. And he just looked at me. He's like, does this always happen? I'm like, I don't know. I never lived here before. This is day one. You know what I'm saying? So we had a little detour, get to our house. And but one of the greatest security systems you can have in a neighborhood, it's a little crazy, is it's called get to know your neighbors, right? Get to know your neighbors is a great system. And a dog doesn't hurt too. But and anyway, I remember my daughter and I, she was one at the time, we would just walk in the neighborhood, right? We would just walk and get to know people and stuff. And one time there's some guys who are actually selling dope on our corner. And so they come up, but there was this girl who was sitting there who looked real cold. So I went back in my house, right, and I made a whole bunch of hot chocolate, right? And I come out to the drug corner, right? I'm like, hey, what's up, y'all? I was like, hey, you guys want some hot chocolate? And they looked at me like I was crazy. Then I was thinking, maybe I am crazy. And but then I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a drink from each cup so you know it's not poisonous. Then y'all can have it. And they're like, oh, word up, all right. And they took all that. And I was like, hey, see you later. And one of the things I learned, like, in discipleship, it's not about doing great things. Like, so often we have this mentality, we got to change the world. No, you don't have to change nothing. It's about doing the small things with great love. And we can all do that. It's about doing the mundane with great love every day. And as we do the small things with great love, and you do those little things, what happens is you back up in your life and you go, oh, snap, there's some really cool things going on. There's some good things that are going on. And I think that's the challenge, is we need to shift from being a missionary to neighbor. And I remember in that first house we lived, I mean, the neighbors next to us, man, they used to yell so much, right? And then we had neighbors on the other side who were like old and going deaf, so they played their music real loud, right? So it was just really loud. And I remember for this over here, like we would just pray for them, like, God, just be with them. Like we wouldn't pray as loud as they were yelling, but God still heard us. And if this lady, she never came out her house, right? She was always inside. And a couple times I saw her in the backyard, right? And we got to know her. And probably 6-7 months in, I'm sitting on the front porch, right? Like it was cool because you don't have to watch the news at night. You just watch out your front porch and see all kinds of neat things. And so like we're sitting there and she's sitting and she's talking to a neighbor lady, right? And I'm just minding my own business. And the lady leaves and she goes, Chris, I can't believe it. I said, what? She goes, I just talked to a neighbor. And I'm thinking, what do you want, a sticker? Like, congratulations. No, you don't understand. She goes, I'm the neighborhood witch. I don't talk to anybody. That's sort of what she says, like a Nazarene version of what she said. But she goes, I don't talk to anybody. She goes, but I see the way that you interact with your neighbors. And man, it feels good. And she goes, another thing, seeing you and Laura gives me hope that marriage works. If you want to do something radical for Jesus, work on your marriage. You know what I mean? Don't go anywhere. Don't do anything. Don't serve anybody. Just work on your marriage, because marriages are jacked up everywhere, right? Then it's like we got to be a people that know how to care for our spouses, like pray with our spouses, be with our spouses, right? And from that, like if you want to go and be something in the world, like if you're married, start there, because guess what? There's a lot of people with broken families. Even here in Huntington, right? Broken families. And if they see a model, they see people who are working on their marriage through the good and hard times, right? And I think like some of that is when you be a neighbor, you allow your lives to show, right? Because, we got to shift this mentality too of, hey, we need to bring people into the church. Discipleship doesn't primarily happen in the church, right? Jesus still went to church, right? He still did the synagogue thing, but the majority of his work and discipleship working was outside in everyday life. We've got to be people to begin seeing ourselves as being empowered here to go outside and to make differences in the world, right? I remember a few years ago, my wife and I were at a youth camp, right? And it was this real charismatic guy up there just going at it, right? I mean, he's kind of do the blow on people and they fall over and like, woo, brush your teeth, brother. But and he had an altar call, right? So he's like, all right, if you want to come to Jesus, come to the altar. So a bunch of people came up. If you want to rededicate your life, come to the altar, right? And then he's like, it's still people there. He's like, all right, if you're wearing a blue shirt, you come on up, you know what I mean? White, come on up. He just started calling people out, right, to fill the altars. And everybody came up except one dude, right? And this kid was a gothic kid sitting right in the back, just sitting here like this. And I was like, oh, man, this is going to be good, right? Dude starts ripping him a new one, right? Just starts saying all kinds of stuff that was not good or appropriate, right? And the kid eventually just gets up and leaves. And it was the first time in my life that I actually prayed that someone would not go to an altar. Because I knew if he went to the altar, he was just doing it to shut the dude up. That's why I went to the altar, right? And, and it didn't work. But, it was like, and the kid ends up getting up and leaving. So as a counselor, I got up and walked out after him, right, just to see what was up. And he goes outside, and we start talking for a while. And I'll never forget, he said, man, I come to this church. I haven't been here a long time. Every time I come, there's the same kind of thing that happens. I get judged for who I am. I get judged because I smoke. I get judged because I wear these clothes and my hair looks this way. And he goes, and another thing, he came up, he goes, they're trying to raise all this money to start a Christian arcade here. He goes, me and my friends ain't going to come to this arcade. I mean, they're going to listen to Amy Grant and Michael W. Smith. Heaven forbid, right? Like, we can go to the arcades that already exist. And it dawned on me, like the church, we're not called to create Christian arcades. We are called to go into the arcades that already exist, right? Now, I'm not saying go to an arcade and smoke weed for Jesus, right? No, but I'm saying go to the places that are hard and live different in those places and show people that you can be different and that there's a different way of living, right? Because those people in those places, right, are really God's people, created an image of God just like you. And we're called to go into the arcades that already exist. This is what we're about. Another thing is discipleship takes time, right? It doesn't happen. We live in a fast food world. We want results fast. Discipleship rarely, it took Jesus 30 years before he started getting it popping, right? I mean, and it's like, it takes a long time. Now, I don't know, do you guys still have caravans here? Right? Caravans, right? You remember that? Remember caravans, right? It was like a little Boy Scouts for Nazarenes kind of thing, right? And I was in it, right? And I'll never forget, and this is back in the Avenue days, this is real old days. And I remember a verse that we still learn there, right? And it was, and we'd always say, and Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and faith with God and man. Luke 2:52, right? We'd say it with passion, right? And little I know, saying it at that little age, like it was actually speaking volumes in me. Jesus grew in wisdom and stature, faith with God, man. It wasn't like Jesus grew into his messiahship. Jesus grew as a man. Jesus grew in his mission. And it's the same way with us, is we've got to be willing to root ourselves in our community, root ourselves and allow Jesus to empower us to make a difference. Now, another thing I want to challenge all of us is there's a distinction, right? I think sometimes it's easy to say, you know what, I'm going to live my life. I'm going to live the American dream. I'm going to live whatever it is and try to tap Jesus into it, right? But my thing is, like, first we need to flip that. Say, God, I'm going to follow you no matter what that is. Now, part of that is as an executive, be an executive and do it well, right? If it's to go to Philly or go to Haiti or wherever it is, you follow Jesus. But one of the things I see that with God in my journey the last 24 years is he's a great puzzle maker, right? He seems to put things together in a very interesting way, all right? And sometimes he has a way of putting gifts together. And so I would say, look at your passions. Right? Look at your passions and see what has God given you that you can give inside your cup to the poor. What can you give inside you to make an impact here in the world and in Huntington in particular? And I think, like, for me, it's interesting, like, how I ended up where I'm at today is in seminary, right? We started up this little Bible study on Monday nights, and it was, all right, we're going to pray first, read a little Bible, and then watch Monday Night Football, right? You know, and I mean, that was when Monday Night Football was good. Right? And you wake up in the morning like, dun, 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 first thing, right? And you're just all excited that the game was going to be on. And the guys were like, amen. And I remember doing that, right? And that's when I really started. I always watched football growing up, but like that's when I really started getting into it. And then I moved to Philly, and I started working with Covenant House. And I had like in 3 nights, I had to work an overnight shift, and it was boring. But we had internet, and I discovered this thing called fantasy football. And that's when I became neurotic. Some of you guys know what I'm talking about, right? I had a league for 10 years. I won 3 chips. My wife, my mama, she won 2. So we had half the chips right here. Good job, mama. And but I saw, like, you know, it was interesting that I was doing it, right? I was getting into it and stuff like that. But little did I know that some of the skills and some of the things I was doing, even in that stuff, was preparing me for what I'm doing right now, because I was working with youth in the church we're going to called Iglesia del Barrio, which is Spanish for church in the hood. And we started like connecting, and this kid was like, hey, there's this youth group, there's this football league called Timoteo, right? It's called Timoteo. Can you say that? Timoteo, right? It's Spanish for Timothy, right? And what it was is a small little football league that was started to basically with like 3 or 4 churches. They had like 6 teams, I think it was at the time, and they would say a verse before they play. I think it had like upward bound thing, right? You had similar to that kind of thing, right? And I said, we want to get in it. So I got in it, right? And I'll do anything half. So I'm like, before you know it, instead of just coming in as a coach, I had a coaching staff 8 deep, right? Nobody else had that, right? And we had armbands. We went and started doing we did this thing where we had a training camp. And we started pouring into these kids, right? And before you know it, now it has blown to like we have 12 teams. We have 250 youth that are involved, right? And these guys are from the neighborhood. These aren't just church kids. And we have 50 adults, and a lot of them are from the neighborhood. And what we're doing is we're beginning to empower folks and empower the kids, right? And we begin. And the thing is like we're beginning to see God move in a very powerful and legit way. And what I wanted to do real quick is I wanted to show a video, right? That we put together, and there's actually one of our kids, he actually created the song that goes with it, right? And then and at the end, there's an interview of 3 of our guys. 2 of the guys, one named Teacup, and the other name wasn't his birth name. We gave him that name. And then Alan is the other. They actually came to Huntington. And I remember several years ago, we had somebody asked me, they're like, hey, we want to bring a mission trip to Philly. I'm like, man, that's a great idea. You know what I mean? I think I'll bring a mission trip to Huntington. And they're like, well, what in the world would they do? I'm like, the same thing as you, nothing, but they get a lot out of it, right? And then how it is, right? So I said, I got me a group of guys, and we came to Huntington, right? And they loved it, right? They were moved by it, right? And they loved it, and they thought Huntington girls are cute, and the whole 9, right? And they were, we're gonna move there, right? And so it was amazing to see how God began using it. And so I wanted to hear just a couple highlights, and then we'll wrap this thing up, all right?
Don't ever lose hope. Just believe in the word of Christ. He will never let you down. Just be patient, the good will come around. Don't ever lose hope. Just keep a teammate by your side. Don't let each other down. Watch the whole crowd go crazy when you touch down. It's Timoteo, you gotta love it. Watching the next generation battle out for the public. And though we're all here for the winning, let's not forget the reason we started this in the beginning. That's God, the almighty powerful God. When he is by your side, you're rarely against the odds. I used to hang around the coolest friends, but all that truancy then led me into some foolish hands. If you feel the same, just believe that all can change. And one day you might be inducted in the Hall of Fame. No matter what's in front of you, just go and run your route. Striving for your goals is what dreams are all about. So if you feel the same, just believe that all can change. And one day you might be inducted in the Hall of Fame. No matter what's in front of you, just go and run your route. Striving for your goals is what dreams are all about. Oh, don't ever lose hope. Just believe in the word of Christ. He will never let you down. Just be patient, the good will come around. Don't ever lose hope. Just keep the teammates by your side. Don't let each other down. Watch the whole crowd go crazy when you touch down.
Timoteo, man, it's been a lot. Timoteo is, like y'all say, it's more than football. And to be honest, I do want to say this. If it wasn't for Timoteo, I wouldn't have ever went to college because I didn't think college was that important. But Buddy, Chris, they opened the door. They showed me the way. They showed me the way to college, an opportunity. And through the simple way, I was able to go to Esperanza, and now I currently have an associate's degree in criminal justice, and that's thanks to Timoteo. Because if I never met these guys, if I didn't meet them, then I probably never would have did that. You know, my first thing was to just get a job, but college didn't cross my mind. But that's one of the pros to Timoteo. There's some cons, like I should be the head coach of the Packers, but Buddy's not ready to give it up yet. But no, yeah, Timoteo, man, it's more than football, man. Mentoring young guys, using football is a real good way to connect to the guys.
It helped me grow like throughout the years because when I was young, I was hard-headed, and like Buddy, all the mentors, Buddy, Ness, Misael, Eric was a big role because he didn't want to introduce me to this league, so like it helped me like grow as a person, to fix my attitude. Stop being hard-headed, listen to my coach, and it showed me discipline. And throughout this journey, I've been playing 5 years for Timoteo. Throughout this journey, I've learned a lot. Like, not even through football, like even mentally, and to grow up as an adult, and like to see the outside world and to see God. To listen to like go out to camps and listen to like Ness preach and show us about God. Like it's interesting, and it helped me like.
So through this league, throughout the adults, I've been around Ness, Brian, and Buddy, and Chris Lahr have been my coach. I learned a lot. I learned respect, maturity, and know how to talk with manners. I learned a lot. So throughout the years in Timoteo just not showing me how to play football. They showed me how to become a man, how to become a teenager, and learn the things I need to learn in the streets. So Timoteo they took me out of the streets. I've been going to church lately. They put me in church and stuff. So I've been around Buddy now, Brian, Ness, and all of them. So it's been a good experience in being in Timoteo league.
Like when you go to school, they say get all you can get out of it. Like get all you can get out of Timoteo. Like get all you can get. Like there's so many connects to this organization. Like they can help you with jobs. It's opening jobs. Like school. Like I don't know how many Timoteo graduates we have out of Timoteo. Like Timoteo it's big, man. And get all you can get out of it. All the connects, references, help from the coaches, man. And then don't forget, you can come back, like me. Like I came back to help with the Packers, and like now I get to see other kids go off and do the same thing I did, and create more opportunities for them to better themselves.
Next, I heard about the Apollo Code League. So there's a couple teams they're asking for to play with, but it's not about the league now. It's my social degree now. So you go to college, trade school. I'm in the industry of automotive, doing body work. So that's what I might be doing, trade school, and then might come back, help my team out as being an assistant coach, and see to get they better and see what they can do throughout their future.
What's next? I wanted to go to college, and like I want to come back and like help these kids too, and watch these kids grow up and do the same thing I'm doing. You know, trying to go to college and try to better off. But at the same time, not like isolate myself from Team Mattel. Team Mattel has like, if it wasn't for Team Mattel, it would never like just figure like I can't explain. Like it's hard. I appreciate Team Mattel a lot.
All right, that's my guys, man. So if you see that one thing they all had in common was we want to come back. And that's all the discipleship is, right? It's showing people a new way. Like Timoteo, in reality, is kingdom of God. We just don't use that phrase there. It's a new way of life. It's a new culture. It's a culture of nonviolence. It's a culture of peace. It's a culture of empowering kids, right? And so that's one of the things I love about it is it's catching fire. Like as soon as they see it, they're embracing Jesus. They're embracing a new way of life. They're going to college, but then they want to come back and help. And it's just like a positive cycle that's going on. And I'll just close with kind of the 4 pillars of Timoteo that we have. One is Jesus. We're unashamedly Christian, right? And that's who we are. Like, we want to build the kingdom of God. Like, they do verses ahead of time for the thing, but we also started this thing called the huddle, probably because Bible study didn't sound as cool, right? So we call it the huddle, right? And so we get together, and I was surprised one time this guy named Zeus came in, right? And it's short for Jesus, but they call him Zeus, and he's probably like 6'3" in every direction. Like this way, right? The dude is big, right? He plays lineman in our old head league. We have an adult league too. And in fact, this guy a couple years ago was the maddest I'd ever seen any human get, right? He just snapped on the field. In fact, we had these new little trees at the field planted. He pulled one out of the ground, right? And my buddy was pulling from behind. I'm getting up in front of him, trying to calm him down. He's foaming at the mouth and all this stuff. I mean, insane, right? And we got him calmed down eventually. And then the next year, he came back, and he started helping me, like we're setting up and tearing down all that. He started just hanging out, and we started just building this wrong. And he started saying, man, he goes, I think I'm changing. I said, yeah, man, I'm seeing something. I'm not really sure what it is. You know, yeah, and the pastor said he's seen me change. And so next thing I know, he's showing up at the huddle, right? And beginning to see, and we're talking about what does it mean to be a man, right? And it's interesting to see. And if you knew this guy, he's not ready like to come up here and give a testimony yet. That'd be kind of not ready for that yet. But he's getting there, right? And to see the growth that's in his life has been absolutely phenomenal. And another thing is excellence. And so often, especially in places like the ghetto and stuff, people just want to give them the leftovers. But now whatever we do, we're going to do it with all the passion and all the things that we got. And so we have not only, we line the fields, we get our own, we started a ref school to get our refs up to speed. We have our own website, right, where we even have our own thing called Timoteo TV. It's kind of like ESPN program, right? And it's like I dress up. It's the only time you'll see me in a suit, but I'm only in a suit from here up because I'm under the table the rest of the way, right? And we're breaking down the games, and we're talking about all this stuff, and the kids love it. And it gives them dignity to hear their name, right? And it gives them dignity to see. So we really pour a lot into this league, and so kids are into it. But one very important pillar is empowerment. And this is the essence of discipleship. It's not just doing the work for people, right? Youth pastors, it's not about just doing the work for the kids, right? But it's allowing the opportunity for kids to step up in the situation. One of the most exciting things we have is a summer camp right now. And I'm getting ready to go back to it, where we have 4 teams, and these are where we take the younger kids, 10 to 15, who play. But then we hire 2 coaches for each team that are 16 to 18 years old that will be in the league at least one more year, right? And we do some serious leadership development with them, and they run the offense, they run the defense, right? And they begin pouring into, and we're seeing these guys that you see on the screen. These are guys like you should see their growth that they've had, right? And these are guys that are beginning to see the reality of Jesus, beginning to see the reality of what's going on. And finally, it's partnership. We realize we can't do any of it alone. Right? And discipleship never is about doing it alone, but it's about partnering with other churches. And, we have a collection of 12 churches we work with, but we work with churches and organizations and things like that. And so, one of the things I was thinking is you guys prayed me into the kingdom, right? I was kind of going on a jacked up way, and you guys prayed me into the kingdom. And I ask that you do the same for my guys, that you guys take some time to pray for my guys, that God's presence and power will continually move there. But I also encourage you to look at our own selves. And I see that the church has been taking leaps and bounds of being real missional and being out in the community. And the question is, where is God pulling on you, right? Are you just a believer? Are you a disciple, right? Are you someone that believes, but as God, have you given him everything that you got? And are you willing to go wherever he calls you to, whether that's here, outside the four walls, or somewhere else? And that's really the challenge for all of us, right? Is God, just take me. Do with me whatever you want. Let me pray. Jesus, I thank you so much for this place. I thank you for your presence in Huntington. I thank you for what you're doing amongst the people in this congregation, in this community. I pray that you pour out your spirit. God, just bless this congregation with your spirit, that folks would continually follow you and make world changers and produce disciples. And God, I pray for the guys in Timoteo. I pray that you would move in their lives, give us wisdom and discernment and continue